Shalom Shalom, this is Elder Sherebyah. Glory to YAHWEH, Beit Nun Sofit YAHWEH, YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH. You can call this part 3 of the blessings of being the first fruits. Now, what exactly really is a first fruit? Now, first fruits came to YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH in different ways. All right, some received the word in 1978, 1979, 1980. Some in the early to mid 80s. Some receive it at the last, which the last is what I call 1986, because December 1986, YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH announced that he was shutting the doors. No more new people. A few people, wander in after that. But just because one received the word in the early days doesn't make them first fruit. All right? First fruits are those who came to YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH. All right? Submitted to him and allow him to teach them, and they converted, became renewed in the spirit of their minds. Because a tree is known by the fruit it bears. So if you did not convert, you're really not his fruit. The fruit are those who converted. All right? That's what. Now, some that came in the early days were blossoms, man. They were just blossoms. They didn't really produce. Some were little green fruit that fell off the tree. Some fell off the tree and they ripen on the ground. That's all right, but not everyone is the first fruits. I know when I came in 1984 to YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH, some who came before me did not consider me as first fruits. So again, first fruits came in different ways. Questions I've been asked, and I've been asked to me about all the various groups around and individuals that's putting themselves out there as leaders. And some have asked me, who are these individuals? Are they legitimate or what? And look, let me say this. 1986, about a couple months before Tabernacles, YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH sent letters to the various congregations. And I was the elder in Orlando at the time. And in the letter, it stated that if there's anyone in the congregation that wants to come to Miami to learn how to be a teacher in YEC, tell them be prepared to come to Tabernacles to stay for 6 months. Sister Yelada was interested, so she came to stay. And ironically, YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH kept me also that feast. Early in the day, I had a rough day in elders class, a very rough day, YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH began to speak about some things, and I realized that he may have been addressing me, so I stood up. And he ripped into me because some of the congregation members that accused me of some things, and I stood there. I said not a word. I just let him talk. He didn't ask me to speak. He didn't ask me if it was true or false. He just spoke. And, he said some things that, hurt me, and when he was finished, I sat down. And my mind was just running wild, just thinking what my next move would be, if I wanted to stay, if I wanted to leave, it was up in the air. So that night, I walked into class, and he saw me. He said, I'm keeping Sherebyah and his wife for a blood transfusion. And, that calmed me a little bit, because I'm telling you, he had destroyed me, man. My mind was shot, And anyway, after the feast was over, he separated those who came to learn how to be a teacher. It was mainly sisters, but there were a few brothers in there. After the feast was over, he went to Orlando, and he came back from Orlando, and, he ripped into me again because Ephron and some of the ones he sent to Orlando lied on me, they showed him something, and he believed that was me. They told him that was me. And, he said I left the place a mess, which was a lie, because they didn't like the place the way it was arranged when they got there. And so they started moving things all around, and they asked me to help them. Because I went back to get some of my personal belongings. Sister had personal belongings. And I held them for a couple hours, and then it was, I had a bus to catch. I told them, I got to go. And I remember she said to me, you don't want to stay and help us? You don't want me to give YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH a good report? I told her, I don't care what you tell him. I got a bus to catch. I'm leaving, So when instead of, straightening the place up, they left it a mess for him to see, man, and they blamed me, So when Yahweh said that, I said, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm not taking this anymore. I'm tired of being falsely accused. And I wrote him a letter of resignation, and he denied my resignation. And what I didn't know was that, before I wrote him the letter, I told Sister Yetta, I said, I'm out of here. I'm not staying. I'm not taking this. And I didn't know, but she wrote him and explained that the place was fine when we left. You know what I mean? And, anyway, he denied my resignation, and, so he started teaching us. It was supposed to be, again, about teachers training. And then he changed it to basic training. He started calling it basic training. And I'm telling you, about 2 weeks into the program, he came from around the TCO sewing department area, that door, and he walked into the auditorium where we had us separated, and he said, I'm going to teach you our rulership training. I'm going to teach you how to rule over all of them. He said, they're all corrupt and wicked. I don't want you talking to none of them here. He said, brothers, if you have a wife here that's not a part of this program, I don't want you talking to her until this is over. Sisters, you have a husband here, I don't want you talking to him until this program is over. And he separated us, and no one was able to approach us or talk to us. He banned that. The people looked at us, that's all they could do was look at us strange. They really know what was going on, what he was teaching us, Only some of the supervisors was able to approach us. And those are the ones that he used to prep us. And different ones would take their turn daily and prep us on and divulge to us things that he had taught them concerning leadership, rulership. And then he would come, ask us, what did they teach us? What did we learn? And then he would teach on that and take it further, And so it went. It was supposed to be 6 months, but it lasted 3 months. It was 3 months, After the Opelok incident, he brought some of the young elder trainees to Miami, and some of them became a part of rulership training class, but they missed the first month and a half of it. They came in at the latter end, and so it was. Some have asked me about the various individuals, the different group, Peace Foundation, and all these individuals that put themselves out there as leaders, Kezion, Deborah Israel, Mika, Peace Foundation, Carmel. And I told them, Yahweh did not establish Peace Foundation. We did. YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH left Uriah David to keep his work going, but instead of keeping it going, he began shutting things down, and he put it in the hands of Carmel, and her staff, and they shut things down. They, took the nation to hell. I remember while YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH was still being tried, they told him that we did not want to keep it going. I was never part of a meeting where I was asked if I want to keep it going, But they made a decision for themselves and shut it down. But I'm going to say now, in rulership training class, it was about 40 of us to start off with. And it was mainly sisters. I look around, and I'm telling you, Deborah Israel was not a part of rulership training class. Kezion was not a part. Mika was not a part. That molten calf is not a part. All right? See, what people from around the country don't realize is that YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH secretly educated, taught, trained some who he selected from across the country as the future rulers. Because he told us, I'm going to wait and see how many of you are left when this is all over. It's not all over yet. I know some probably thought when the class was over, he would put them in leadership position. But no, he said, when this is all over, I'm going to see how many of you are left. Now, not everyone who was a part of the class wanted to be a ruler. They came just to be teachers. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody interested in leadership and rulership. Because some, after it was over, went back to their cities. And then after the YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH was arrested, the rest basically left. Only a few, stayed around. And, of course, people also had to go back to their lives after the nation broke down. But some who were in rulership training class literally bowed to that molten calf, supported that, helped build that. They followed something that was created, something inferior when they were supposed to lead, to rule. And some have passed away, some yielded up to spiritual ghosts. I ran into a sister in Atlanta that was a part of rulership training class, and she was surprised, to see us. She asked, y'all still with YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH? Of course. She was now following some other Hebrew Israelite group, So It wasn't meant for everybody. I always felt that when he changed it to rulership training class, I always felt personally that it was all about me. I felt that was his way of making up to me for them misleading him and have him to crush me the way he did. That's how I feel. When he said, I'm keeping Shrebyah for a blood transfusion, then he changed what was teacher training class, the rulership training class. I felt that was about me. All right. But yes, I look around and these individuals that put themselves in position, that molten calf, all that is government de facto. Government de facto. Because government de jure was replaced. All right. And government de jure shall be reestablished again. But you see, what's her name? Mahatabel, excuse me. She's out there, working with Azuba, they, doing their thing, having their banquets, meeting people, and, in my opinion, she's positioning herself. And that's a good thing because she's legitimate. Because she is one of the alumni of rulership training class. I've watched her for some time. I want her to succeed. Yes, I bit her up a few times because she said some things that was incorrect. All right? And I don't appreciate her attaching Yahweh's name to herself. She's chosen to be a ruler, not a follower. Don't follow behind these people who are naming themselves Yahweh. I put the audio out there. YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH said, he's not going to allow you to name yourself Bots and Ben. This ain't go so bad, But outside of that, I have nothing against her. I'm not against her. I would like for her to succeed. I succeeded when I fought for and championed YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH's freedom. The only person that was with me was Sister Yadapur. And we got that done. I went for the gusto. I went for numero uno. I went for the head. Because I already told YAHWEH Ben YAHWEH held this class, and in front of all the elders, I'm going to be number one. So watch out for me. That's on the Attitude series. So I would like for her to succeed. So again, I'm not against her. Don't y'all think I'm against her. But she is legitimate. All right. Shalom, shalom.